Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of Chicks and Sticks, brought to you by the Hockey Writers. Off to a great start tonight. My name is Melissa Boyd, and I'm once again joined by my partners in crime, Kristy Flannery, Hannah Garfield, and Mariah Holland. Hi, ladies. How are you doing tonight?
This is just evidence we do better with alcohol. That's all that just proved.
That's what we're missing, right? Jeez. Or maybe it's because we've hit double digits, in our episodes.
Right?
That's what threw me off. If you're enjoying our show, make sure to drop us a like, a follow, or a comment from wherever you're watching or listening. And send us in your questions, and we'll be sure to answer them in a future episode. So now that the Stanley Cup has been awarded as of last night, Wednesday night, for a second consecutive year to the Tampa Bay Lightning, we wanted to this week do a bit of a 2020-21 season recap, discuss our favorite moments, our disappointments. So we're going to have a fun little chat about the season that was before the off season ramps up, because that's going to be coming very soon in the coming days. July is going to be a busy month off season wise. So before we get to that, we wanted to get this season out of the way. And before I do that, though, I have to, obviously, the hockey world was rocked this week with a very tragic story. And that I wanted to make sure that we paid tribute to Matiss Kivlenieks, the goaltender for the Columbus Blue Jackets, who passed away earlier this week following an incredibly tragic accident. Our thoughts and prayers are with Matiss's family, friends, teammates, and the entire Blue Jackets organization. And please watch, if you haven't already, please watch this week's episode of THW Live, which was released earlier today. Host Mark Shea, who covers Columbus for the site, was lucky enough to follow Kivlenieks' career very closely, and he delivered a beautiful tribute to start the show, so please do check that out. All right, so let's get our roundtable discussion started. The first thing I wanted to throw to you girls is, who was your biggest surprise this season? Either regular season, playoffs, team and player. So we'll start with Kristy.
Mariah's going to like my answer because I have two. As far as teams go, my biggest surprises were the Florida Panthers and the Minnesota Wild. I thought that Florida, I don't know. When Florida signed Coach Q, I said, I'm like, watch out. Because Coach Q, he can make miracles happen. He's kind of like a Herb Brooks. You give him a team, he'll make it happen. And they were really good this year. They were competitive. Even they gave us probably the best round of hockey in the postseason. That Florida Tampa series was amazing. So I have to go with them. And Minnesota kind of just came out of nowhere. Who knew?
And Hannah, what about you?
Yeah, I agree about Minnesota. They definitely, I kind of forgot about them a year ago.
Which is why.
Sorry, Mariah. I'm so sorry. So I definitely agree with that. But I think for me, one of the bigger surprises was the Carolina Hurricanes, which we knew they were good and they've been good for the past 2 years. But I wasn't expecting how good they were, especially during the regular season when they won the Central Division. Beating Tampa Bay Lightning several times, which, as you all know, just won the Stanley Cup. Obviously, things were much different in the postseason, but during the regular season, there was a stretch there in the middle of the season where they couldn't lose. And they have such a great team. Sebastian Ajo is probably one of the most underrated superstars in this league. I didn't even realize he had 57 points in 56 games this year. He is, as someone who I lived in North Carolina for several years when college and saw a bunch of their games, and it's been so cool to kind of watch their evolution the past couple of seasons. And the Bruins are always my number one, but I really hope the Canes get a championship in there soon.
Hannah, it's so funny you say that because I have Nedeljkovic as my surprise player. I literally had no idea who he was.
I had heard about him for a couple years. He was always kind of this guy that they were talking about in the system, but never really had his shot. And goaltending has been kind of their biggest issue in the last several years. So his like emergence this season was really probably one of the big reasons why they were so good.
Mm-hmm.
And what about your surprise player? Now that we know Kristy's, I'm going to ask you.
Sorry, I had to throw it in.
That's okay.
My surprise player, since we're kind of jumping to that, was Adam Fox. I mean, obviously we knew he was good last year. He had 42 points in 70 games. This year he had 47 points in 55 games, and he won the Norris Trophy. Again, he's a guy that you knew was good, but was he Norris Trophy winning good? And then he just this season was phenomenal, which again, it kind of pains me to say this for a New York guy, but no, he is the future. Him and Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes are the future of defense in the NHL, and it is a very bright future there.
Well, we have the same surprise player, so
we did not talk about this ahead of time.
Mariah, what about you?
For the team, I'm going away from Kristy and Hannah, and Mel, you're going to like my answer. I went with Montreal because, to be honest, no offense to them at all, when they were up in the first round, did they have Edmonton in the first round? Toronto, that's right. I didn't expect them to make it past Toronto, and then Winnipeg, right?
Yeah.
Was the second? Yeah.
Yes.
I get all the Canadian teams confused who they played. But yeah, Montreal was my surprise because I didn't see them coming at all, and I really, really wanted them to win the whole thing. No offense to Tampa. But as far as a player, I'm going to go with Ryan McDonough because I still thought he was with the Rangers until I saw Tampa. And I'm like, oh. So yeah, and they were talking about him so much last night, how good he is, and that he's finishing college even. He was their, in my opinion, their best defenseman in the final. At least he was dominant. The Habs couldn't do anything with him when he was on the ice. So,
and it makes me so mad because for the newsletter, shameless plug for the newsletter, I did 2 key players for each team going into game 5. And I had Ryan McDonough as my choice, and I switched it at the last minute. And then everyone after game 5 was like, oh, Ryan McDonough. I was like, I was on par, and then I changed it.
Darn.
The Canadians were 100% the biggest surprise of the off season.
Did anybody, I want to know somebody who had them picked in their bracket to go to the Stanley Cup final. That's what I want to know.
I believe, did Pat Brown of the Grind Line not have them going to the final, I think, in his bracket? I think he told me that, but maybe he was lying to me. But,
I think for the first round, when we did it for the newsletter, I think he was the only one that picked Montreal beating Toronto. So you might be correct.
Yeah.
I'll leave it to Pat.
Well, as I said, my surprise player was also Adam Fox, but my surprise team, keeping it north of the border, was the Ottawa Senators.
Oh, that's a good one.
Because, I mean, I liked what they did in the off season. They obviously have a lot of really good young players, but they gave the teams in the North Division fits this year.
Yeah.
Including, and probably especially the Canadians. They're a team that plays really hard and in your face, and they're well coached, and they're going to be very good in not long.
Yeah, they're on the rise for sure.
Yeah, their core of young players is really, really solid, and it just has me thinking that the Atlantic Division next season is going to be so tough. So that just reminds me that we're going back to the old divisions next year.
Hell, we'll be competitors.
I know. I can't wait for that rivalry to be reignited. So moving from your biggest surprise to your biggest disappointment, we'll start with Hannah this time. We'll go with your team first.
Yeah, so for the team, my biggest disappointment was Edmonton Oilers. And I feel like they've been the biggest disappointment for several years now because they have undeniably the best player in the league in Connor McDavid. And they just can't seem to be able to build a team around him. And granted, that's one of the great things about hockey is that it is such a team sport and one player isn't going to make a difference like in some other leagues.
Yeah.
But when you have the best player in the league, in the world, and arguably another top 10 best player in the world in Leon Draisaitl, you should be able to build a team around them. And the fact that they got swept in the first round it's a disappointment. And it's not good going into this new ESPN deal when you consider that, McDavid's your best player. The ESPN deal is going to really market the league to a bigger range of fans in America. And they're going to be they latch on to star players.
Yeah.
And if your star player isn't, on a team that's good, then it's not going to be good for the league and for growing the sport in this new deal that they're getting.
I saw a couple teams that they were projecting that we're going to go in on Blake Coleman. And I said, if any team needs a Blake Coleman, it's the Edmonton Oilers. That's who, I don't think he's going to go there. I think he's going to if he's going to go anywhere, he's probably going to go to Dallas. But I'm like, that's the team that needs a Blake Coleman type player.
And it sounds like they're in on Zach Hyman from Toronto, which would be something similar. But, I agree. And it's, McDavid's regular season was like one for the ages, and it's just such a shame that they wasted that all that he did this year.
But that's the story of the Edmonton Oilers in the Carlson era. They're just wasting his. He's only 24. Like, it's not that dramatic, but still, they're wasting all the young years.
Yeah, for sure.
And they're on their second GM, and it's not. So it isn't like it's just we can't just blame Peter Chiarelli now. It's also you're on the next guy. Like, and he also can't do it.
They've had a couple coaches. I feel like McDavid's played for a handful of coaches too.
Yeah. They just it's tough. They haven't been able to. It's especially on the back end, like goalie and defense. They just haven't been able to put something solid together.
Which is also crazy because Darnell Nurse also had a really great year.
Yeah, I thought he should have been a finalist for the.
Yeah.
They're kind of like Buffalo, and not as bad as Buffalo, but they have these pieces, but they can't seem to just get it all to work.
Yeah, it's true.
They're like Chicago. They need offensive support. They need goaltending. They need defense, maybe a coach. Like, they just need everything.
Yeah, if you ask from last week, if you remember our show from last week, that's basically what Galen Brooke told us, right? They need a little bit of everything.
For Chicago. Yeah, we'll take whatever we can get.
Yeah, for sure. Mariah, what about you? Who was your most disappointing team?
I was going to say, with this question, we sound like last week's show with how harsh they were getting with Chicago. I had a number of teams because I really couldn't pick just one. I will say Minnesota is not on this list, but probably Edmonton, of course, Washington, Pittsburgh, all the teams with all the big players went out in the first round, which is, if you're looking for underdog teams, is great. But when you're trying to, like Hannah said, market the league, Crosby, Ovechkin, they didn't make it.
Yeah, for sure. Kristy?
I had an out of the box pick. I actually picked San Jose for the simple fact that they're in such a bind when it comes to their roster, their contracts. I don't know what they're doing for the expansion draft, but they are forking out so much money to aging players. And it's like their window, they had like a legitimate 2-year window to win the cup. Yeah. And it was like on year 3, they brought in all these players. Erik Karlsson's not the player that he used to be. Brent Burns is, I think, 36, which blew my mind. I thought he was younger than that. I didn't realize he was 36.
Burns.
But like they're like Vlasic's 34. Like they're forking out way too much money. And I don't know how they're going to go into a rebuild when they have so many key players with no trade clauses and no movement clauses. So I think they're kind of, for their franchise, they went about this all wrong. I think they're a disappointment.
Can I pop in here? Because I actually had Erik Carlson as my disappointment for a player, partly because I just never heard from him the whole season. And, you know,
he's not the player he was.
No, a couple years ago, he was, you know, undeniably one of the best, if not the best defenseman in this league. And I feel like it was not that, it was probably only 2 or 3 years that has really gotten him to this downfall. And he had his lowest points per game of his career. He only had 22 points. And he's just, I don't know. He's on a big contract, and he's not, I don't think he's the elite player that he was anymore. And I guess I wonder if I wanted to kind of pose this question is, do you guys think Erik Carlson is still an elite NHL player?
No, I don't think so. And I mean, from the moment that he signed that huge deal, 8-year deal, I think he's making over $11 million a year. I mean, right away I was like, that's just bad. That's going to hurt so much. And you know, everyone was kind of you know, laughing at the Senators for that trade, but actually
it worked out
pretty good for them. You know, because I mean, being in Montreal, I watched Erik Carlson a lot, and you're right, he was probably the best defenseman in the league. And it's amazing. Like, he's unrecognizable. Like, you would never know that he used to be elite, but I would say no, he's not elite anymore.
Doesn't that kind of kill you to say, though? Because he, along with Taves, they're my favorite NHL players. And like, I mean, when it was like the Carlson sweepstakes, every team wanted him. But even like, I would have burst into a million pieces if he came to New Jersey. But when I saw what the contract was, I was like, oh no, like that's, you can't.
Agreed.
It's too much money. Like, you're getting like a franchise player, but he's injured. He's not the player that he was, and he's only aging. He's not going to be the player that he was. So it kills me to say it, but no, he's not.
No.
And that kind of breaks my heart.
Yeah. Poor San Jose.
Should be reserved.
San Jose. Yeah. I feel bad for San Jose. Yeah. They had a good couple of years, but
they're in trouble. They're in trouble now. Well, my disappointing team is the Vancouver Canucks, actually.
Interesting.
Well, I mean, they had a tough year, obviously. They had their COVID outbreak and all that. But for me, they were in the playoffs in the North Division. They were going to be there was no question to me. And I feel like, especially they had a great run last year too in the playoffs. And I just thought that, you know, their young players would have one more year of experience, and like, because they've got a lot of good pieces. I mean,
a lot of young pieces.
I mean, yes, they are also in a bit of cap hell as well, but still, you know, I was expecting more from the Canucks.
And two of their players requested a trade out, right?
Yeah, Nate Schmidt, it sounds like, who they just acquired from Vegas.
And they said Holtby's probably going to be out too, right?
Probably, yeah. So yeah, it's tough, but I was expecting more from them, but it is what it is. And
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Holtby never made a ton of sense to me in Vancouver.
No, I agree. Yeah, I agree.
They have such young, talented goalies.
They should go for a young, like, if Carter Hart wants to change of scenery, that wouldn't be a bad landing spot for him to kind of develop with the team.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's too bad because you know, they're kind of stuck with these like veteran contracts, but you know, if I was them, I'd be like, like you said, like youth all day, and bring in a couple of veterans around them. But it's tough. They're in a really tough spot too. Like, what do you do with that anyway? But I was expecting more from them for sure. Well, we know Hannah's a disappointing player. Kristy, what about, who was yours?
You know what's funny is I couldn't even really think of one. Like, I literally sat and I was trying to think about it. Well, you came up with a question.
I know. You know. You wrote. And I was just like, oh, I don't know. But then as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I don't know.
I don't know. It was really hard. And I even went through like the stats of like I went through like the NHL stats page and I was like, who's like sticks out to me as a really poor performance? And I couldn't think of anybody. So Mariah, who'd you pick?
It's like a stab to my own heart with my answer I actually have two. I thought of one while we were talking.
Oh, I'm going to take whatever one you're not going to use. I'm going to take.
You're going to hate the second one I'm going to say.
Go for it.
So the first one is, I love him to death because he's my favorite player, but Crosby, especially for the playoffs, I was expecting a lot more. And he had like 2 points in the 6 games they had.
Yeah.
And for someone that used to be, the top, I mean, he still had 62 points in the season, which is more than I think majority of the Wild players had. Actually, all of them.
Yeah.
But it's just like, okay, is he nearing the end or like what's going on?
Yeah, it's weird. There too, Pittsburgh is, they're trying to keep the window open, and I'm not sure. And I think actually there was an article published on THW a couple of days ago about Malkin and being like, literally, it feels like this guy has been in trade rumors for years.
Years.
And it's kind of like, well, but they keep him around.
But didn't Pittsburgh finish first in the East though?
It was actually, yes, it was. Never mind. Ignore me.
Because they were when the season first started, I thought Philly was going to be in the top 4 and I had Pittsburgh missing it. And then I think Pittsburgh finished first, but I think with them, when you see them in the first round, they had like no heart.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just like they didn't really want it, I guess.
Like
I feel like they need like some young, hungry players that haven't won the cup that like really want to go in and like win. I feel like that's what Pittsburgh kind of needs, mixed in with like the veterans and like the franchise players.
3 out of the 4 teams in the East, I would say, between Boston, Capitals, and Pittsburgh, they all have similar issues where they're built for really great regular season success because they have these incredible superstars.
They're all aging.
Yes, and they're not built for really long-term playoff success. And you saw that play out exactly this year. They don't have depth. They committed a lot of money to aging players, and that's not working anymore.
Yeah. Mariah, who's your second? That's now going to be my pick. It's going to be Zach Parise, isn't it? I knew.
He was my regular season. My playoffs, he did fantastic in my opinion. But regular season, like I said, I love him, but he's another one that's aging. So I mean,
and he had so many back issues. Like it's kind of like a Carlson situation where, and it's, oh God, who said it? Was it it might have been Jackie Redmond, but she was saying like, look at the way he plays.
Yeah.
Like it's not a surprise that he has so much wear and tear on his body. Like he's always in like those hard, dirty areas, like in front of the net. But yeah, he was another one. It's interesting when you look at the contracts because on one hand, like you see these contracts being forked out and you're like, dude, this is not going to work for you in like 4 years. Like, what are you doing? But at the same time, when you're the player, it's like $100 million. Like, sure, why not? Add a couple signing bonuses, no problem. It's not the player's fault that they're giving out ridiculous contracts that aren't going to age well. Like we said, Dougie Hamilton on an 8 or 9 year deal. Stupid.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, I think Zach Parise kind of falls under that umbrella of they gave him a really big contract expecting him to be a star until like basically 40 years old. He had a really bad injury. No, he's not going to come back from that, but he's going to be clutch when you need him. Captain America.
8-year deals only belong to Connor McDavid type player.
Yeah.
And you give it to them when they're like 20.
Exactly.
Or like a Nico Hischier. Yeah.
And should be signed at like 23 and under.
Like them giving Nico Hischier an 8-year contract. I'm like, okay, cool. Like I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
You giving like Kyle Palmieri an 8-year contract? No, we're not doing that.
No.
Well, do you remember when Ovechkin's contract was this was, I think, years ago, in the NHL originally, their first contract, they said no, because it was like a 15
years.
Because I think they ended up with
12.
13.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just like, okay.
And the thing with Ovechkin, because I had to research him for an article, I I think he negotiates his own contract. So he doesn't even have to pay an agent. I was like, talking about brilliance right there. Now, even with him, sorry, I'm going to go off topic, but his contract's ending. Yeah. He's older. Yeah. Do you sacrifice the future of the Washington Capitals to keep your franchise player happy?
That's, and it's one of those things I think too, what I've heard is that they kind of have a handshake deal done already, but they're only going to announce it after
the expansion draft.
Because
I'm curious what they're going to give him.
But I know, because it's interesting. But I mean, how can, if you're Washington, you can't obviously let him go. Like,
you can't let him walk, but you don't want to have him be extremely selfish either and say, I still want like $12 million when he has to be in his mid-30s at this point.
Yeah.
He's like 36, I think.
36, I think.
Yeah, like you know, like you have to find that balance. So I'm curious to see what he's actually going to get out of this.
Interesting. We'll find out in a few weeks. We'll be discussing it, I'm sure.
We will be talking about it
in a future show very soon.
And he's 35.
Oh, close enough.
A year off.
Well, he'll be 36 at the start of next season. So Mariah, you're right. All the points for you.
Well, Mel too.
And Mel, all the points for everybody.
Okay, next question. A little bit more, probably easier, this one. Your favorite moment from this season? Regular season and playoffs if you have. So we'll start with Mariah this time.
This one's going to be all about the Wild for me. And Kaprizov's debut, first game of the season, gets the overtime winning goal, has 2 other assists. And honestly, playoffs, him winning the Calder for me was... It was all Kaprizov for me for favorite moments of the season, to be completely honest.
Kristy.
So for the regular season, Hannah, you'll actually be happy with this. I loved when Chara scored his first goal as a Washington Capital. I just loved the way the team like rallied around him. It was like a feel-good moment. Like, I don't even like Chara, but it was just such a feel-good moment. I enjoyed that for the regular season. Loved the whole concept of an outdoor game at Lake Tahoe. Like instead of like the baseball and football like stadiums, I thought it was genius going to Lake Tahoe. I hope they do that again and fans can actually go. For the postseason, I have Ehlers protecting Evans. That is like a forever like heartwarming moment. And I don't know if you guys watched it, but Doc Emmerich's sign off for NHL and NBC, bawling my eyes out, and I didn't even have rosé, and I was just teary eyed watching that whole thing happen.
I did see it.
Love that you brought up Chara because, I love that moment too. And I didn't even think about that, even though it did pain me that it was the Washington Capitals. But I love Chara. And I think, I don't know, that was such a great moment. But I did agree with you on my favorite moment of the season was also the Winter Classic. Tahoe was just such a great location. And visuals, like cinematography was on point.
They need to do that again.
Yeah. And the Bruins fashion was iconic.
Very important.
Yes.
Very important.
And for my favorite moment from the playoffs, I will fully admit I'm a bitter Atlantic Division rival. So I don't love that Tampa won, but I mean, I think you can't deny it's really cool that Pat Maroon just won his 3rd Stanley Cup in a row. Like, that's a really cool moment.
I agree with that, especially it's Pat Maroon. It's not like it's Connor McDavid or like Sidney Crosby.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Mine is, I'm going Mariah's route. Favorite moment was Cole Caulfield's, arrival in general.
Him landing in Montreal.
His hotel quarantine. His first goal, he had 2 overtime goals that basically allowed Montreal to get into the playoffs. Really, they were extra points. And playoff moment. The whole thing. I mean, I think it has to be Arturi Lekkonen's goal in Game 6 against Vegas to
that was great.
Get them to the final. I mean, there's a lot of moments I could pick from, but
Yeah.
I mean, that one was the most significant because they gave them a berth into the Stanley Cup final. So,
And
yes,
I think it was great too when Price and Weber had their post game.
yes.
I love that Price took accountability, even though I don't really think it was his fault. But
Yeah.
Weber was right there to be like, no, we didn't do our job in front of you. Like, I
Yeah.
thought that was that's like a team moment right there.
Yeah, and it actually perfectly sort of illustrated and encapsulated what the Canadians were about this postseason. It was
Yeah.
entirely a team effort.
Yeah.
Of course, they wouldn't have been there without Carrie Price. We all know that, like, impossible.
Obviously, yeah.
But like, team through and through, from top to bottom, from the GM all the way down to the
Yeah.
last guy. It was great to, like you said, it was great to see that. And
Yeah.
Price's quote, as well as, he's like, I'm very disappointed. He's a man of very few words, and I thought him just saying, I'm very disappointed, but I'm only disappointed in the result, was so powerful as well, because it meant, because he was basically saying, I'm very proud of what we've done. It's just, obviously they came up short, but yeah, that was, for me, the whole thing. I'm still, recovering. So less than 24 hours.
Right?
So I'm still recovering.
Gallagher had like the same thing though. Gallagher said that you take more from a loss than a win. And
Yeah.
maybe this needed to happen for us to
Yeah.
learn and be better from it. I mean, look what happened to Tampa when they got killed by Columbus in the first round.
Exactly.
Like, it's a good learning. Price
Yeah.
is young, but he's not ancient.
Well, and I think that this franchise had sort of, I won't say gone off the rails, that's not the right word, but it's sort of come to accept just being okay, and
Like
just
mediocrity.
yeah, exactly. And
Mhm.
I think now it's like it will no longer be accepted, and
Right.
I think that's a huge change for the organization.
Yeah.
And there's, my takeaway is, this is just the beginning. People are like, oh, they're never gonna, like, this is just a one-off. I'm like, no, I'm not saying they're gonna do it again next year. No, but I'm just saying that they're building something, and I think that's what the takeaway is, for sure.
It's the start of a winning culture.
Yeah. Okay, so, well, this season we had a lot of new twists and turns, some additions, some rules, obviously, new divisions, 56-game schedule. Obviously, it was a really sort of special season in that regard. Of all the changes that we had this season, what is one of them that you would like to keep going forward? So we'll start with Kristy.
Oh God, no, skip.
Okay. All right. Hannah, you go first then.
I also want to pass the torch to Mariah.
Okay. Honestly, I'm not 100% into this, but like I liked the playoff seeding, how they did it, because they changed that this year, right? They reseeded them after, what was it, the second round?
Yeah, they kind of did. And then, well, just the seeding of having 4 teams in each division too was a bit different also.
Well, as we all sit down and try and figure this out, since none of us have a prepared answer.
I had a prepared answer.
Oh, then let's go. Mel, what is your prepared answer? And then we can all build off of that one.
Yeah.
My prepared answer was that I liked the idea of playing like they do in baseball, with 2 or 3 games, like mini series against the same team.
Interesting.
Because I thought that it creates a bit of it helps with the rivalry.
It does.
But I say that, but at the same time, I never want to see the Canadian division again. But I couldn't pick a team. I didn't have a disappointing player, but I would say that would be my disappointment, is the Canadian division as a whole was an overall disappointment. But going off on a tangent, but yeah, I like the idea of doing sort of home and home.
I see that. I get
series.
that.
That to me would be something that and also I like that there's I like the 56 games. I find 82 is a lot. So, you know, I'm not saying 56 is the ideal number, but
Yeah.
a reduced schedule would be nice.
How did we feel the fact that two Eastern Conference teams played each other in the final? Like, is that something that we like, or do we like the idea of the best from the East and the best from the West? Because I don't even have an answer for that question, but what do you guys think?
I thought it was a nice change. Like, obviously, I'm a little disappointed because I didn't have anybody from my side.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's interesting. I like that you can play pretty much anybody it's not like Vegas, but you know, like you don't have to have a team from that division conference. I like that it can be anybody at all.
Because because then I think too, it adds more fun into like a real rivalry for the Stanley Cup final. Like, could you imagine like once San Jose figures out like their whole spiel and like they become good again, like eventually like a San Jose, like Vegas Stanley Cup final, like that would be really great for the sport. But the way that they have the East and the West, like that's not really going to happen. Like the Devils playing like LA, like, oh, okay, we see them once, twice a year. Like there's no real rivalry there. And we're not in that era anymore where it's like, you know, Detroit playing Colorado, like all like it's just not like that anymore. It's always going to be a different team. Cause I was going through like the Stanley Cup final, like the matchups for the past couple of years. And I'm like, you have the LA Kings, Chicago, like all like the Penguins, now Tampa, but you have all those one-offs that you really forget were there in the first place. You forget that the Rangers were there. You forget that I forgot that Tampa played Chicago in like 2015. I totally forgot that Tampa was the winning team. Like there's so many one-offs that you really just forget about if they're not that dynasty. So I guess that would be mine then. I think we should do just like the two best teams, whether whether both of them are in the West or both. See what happens when we talk things out, guys. We get
I think Mariah's idea or some you know, you get your final four teams, and then instead of you know, going off what we just said, you have final four teams, you seed them 1 through 4, and then they play each other, and then if it's 2 teams in the East or 2 teams in the West,
so be it.
What do you
go,
agree
guys?
with that.
Oh, now I have an idea, because before when I was thinking about this, I'm like, what did I like? I'm like, I didn't like no fans. I didn't like, you know, the really condensed schedule. I didn't like the like only playing
the new realignment. I didn't like that.
What did I like about this season? The fact that it happened. Like, I will give the NHL credit for being able to pull off a season when I'm sure it looked bleak at times. So
Well, let me ask you this. I was on a different podcast and we were talking, and he's an Arizona Coyotes fan. And he was saying how with the realignment again, with Seattle coming in, Arizona's moving to the Central. How do we feel about that? Because my thought on that initial thought was Arizona's not that great right now. But again, the tides will turn. They'll eventually be on their feet again. And you really are missing out on the desert rivalry of Arizona and Vegas if you're shipping them to the Central Division. Mariah, how do you feel about them being in your division?
Honestly,
it's like the forgotten team, isn't it?
Yeah, well, and it's like I've always kind of liked Arizona, and I just kind of feel bad because I feel like they're like a Buffalo. They don't really. I mean, I think they do better than Buffalo, but they don't really end up amounting to much right now. I'm back when like Doan was there, and they still weren't the greatest, but they were a little more competitive. I feel like they'll get there. As far as being in our division, I kind of agree with you. I think they should be with Vegas, and because they'll have more of all the teams are so spread out in the Central. Well, I shouldn't say spread out because we're not, but
no,
like
I get
Dallas,
what you're saying now.
Yeah, like Dallas is like the only team that's kind of near them down there. So I kind of wish we were staying in the West, honestly. I like the West.
You're like, keep me with the California teams while they're bad. That's great for me.
Well, and I mean, the Central, I get so confused when they keep realigning things. Like, for the longest time, I was like, oh, yeah, we're in the West. Like, Vancouver, Edmonton, all that. I loved when we were in that division. And then they realigned it, and we were Central, and I
Yeah.
mean, I like both. I kind of like the Western teams more. It seems like there's more, I don't know, competitiveness, I guess. Like Detroit and Chicago are competitive, or is Detroit East now? I keep getting them confused.
They're Central this season, right? They were in the Central.
Yeah,
division.
they were in the Central.
Oh yeah, because we were.
They were like a
West.
forgotten team too. They just hung out at the bottom.
Yeah,
and that was it. But
like,
yeah, they were in the Central.
Like I said, I get so confused as to what. But yeah, I mean.
But at the same time, though, if Seattle can pull off what Vegas pulled off, do you want to be in the same division as two of those like monster teams?
If it can make the Wild more competitive and step up their game, yes. Because I think not to go off on the Wild here, but I think if they can play more competitive teams and get that I think they have that next level. They just can't unlock. They need that competitiveness constantly to keep them up there.
Well, when you go back and look at what the Central's going to be, Minnesota has to be like the best team in that division. Everyone else is kind of in like a rebuild. Like Dallas is, I think, going to be consistently like Dallas, like they'll be somewhere, but Chicago, Nashville, like they're all kind of in a rebuild, like retweaking stage. So I think Minnesota has an advantage.
Well, Winnipeg will be back with us, right?
Yeah, then they should be.
They're one of the teams I never know what to expect, and they usually play the Wild really hard. So
I agree with that too.
They would be one of the ones I'm a little nervous about.
Can we all agree that NHL like division alignments are kind of weird?
Yes.
The division always froze me off because it would be Boston, Buffalo, Montreal, Toronto, Detroit, and then you would throw in Florida and
Tampa and Carolina. It makes no sense.
No, Carolina was Metro.
Oh, you're right. Carolina was in my division. Oh, you're
exactly.
Damn, I don't want them in my division.
And then I feel like I've forgotten what they were because
you're right.
Alignments, and now I'm like thinking about them. I'm like, why? How does this alignment make sense?
Yeah, because Columbus, when I first started watching hockey, Columbus was out in the Central, like they were out there, and now they're in with the Eastern.
Yeah.
Too. I agree.
Expansion.
With this, go ahead, Mel.
No, I was just gonna say expansion is making life complicated, I think.
It really is.
Yep.
Well, and then with the whole COVID realignment thing where they were trying to do it so there was less travel.
Yeah.
And Minnesota was central. I understand with Canada doing its own thing, they had to shift.
Yeah.
But I'm like, Minnesota traveled like the farthest. I'm just like, couldn't you like have moved a team that even Dallas, I think, would have been a little bit like as far as like the southern teams, like maybe do like split that way somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, Dallas or St. Louis. I need a map now. But yeah, those two probably made more sense than Minnesota, I would think.
6 does geography.
Without a map,
learn a new lesson
a lot of trouble.
Stay tuned next week for your geography lesson.
Yeah.
Math will be next.
I will be absent for that episode.
Hey, we need a math for stats. Just saying.
Well, since we're talking about divisions, I wanted to ask you also, based on what happened this year, if you were kind of put on your commissioner hat, if you were NHL commissioner, what's one thing you would like to see changed, added? Like, what would you do? What would be your first order of business coming into office?
Can of worms.
I said one thing. Your top priority, Mariah. We'll start with you for that.
Oh boy, I feel like this is going to spark a whole round table, but player discipline. Honestly, I don't know what exactly the answer is, other than I want to say trying to make it the same across the board, like come up with a structure that you do this is what you get. The only problem is each situation is different. So how do you go about that? Like you have, we had at this playoffs, Reeves and I'm going to forget, Shifley.
Yeah.
Like you had to compare those differently, but I
Yeah.
feel like some of these should have a straightforward look. You do this, you're out this many games.
Yeah.
If they want certain things like hits to the head to stop, they need to get serious about it.
So whether it's Tom Wilson or Zach Parise, they should have the same consequence.
Yeah.
It should, and I mean, if you keep repeating, it actually gets worse. Not, oh well, this and this and this.
Mhm.
Like here's like your base. So if like you do this hit, here's like 5 games. But if you have a history, we're adding on like 1 game. Like that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
I feel like it would. And so, do they? Okay, so does it depend on the suspension? Do they get paid if they get suspended or they don't?
I don't think they do.
Okay.
They lose money if they
I think no, I
Okay.
don't think they do.
Because I think the more like they should get like along with this, which I guess they usually do. I'm ranting like Kristy usually does, but they should get fined as well, but not just a suspension, but make it so it hits home so they realize this is a punishment.
Mhm.
Agreed. Kristy?
I'm not going to rant. I'm going to keep it short. All I'm going to say is that the officiating, either you're letting them play or you're calling everything. There's no in between.
Yep. Hannah?
I think we're all on the same page because I said I would change the reffing. And I don't know what games Gary Bettman is watching after his comments about how the NHL is the best refs in the world. I mean, obviously, you know, they have a tough job and they're human and mistakes are going to happen.
Mhm.
But that being said, the reffing and the suspensions and the discipline, it was all over the place. This playoffs, this season, it was disappointing to watch as a fan because it just felt like nothing anyone did mattered.
Yeah. Do you think that the refs should be able to look at the iPad like every time, like if there's a call? You think that like how can we incorporate the review and like them checking the iPad to try and minimize mistakes? Is that something that could even be done?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can. I know they started implementing it a bit in the NBA, I believe. Like you can check on certain fouls if they were, you know. Yeah, I think there's a way to do it. But I'm not, I don't know.
How to do it.
I feel like it would still be too, subjective, maybe.
Yeah.
An overhaul is needed,
Mhm.
I think.
I do think there needs to be more incorporation of replay and like being able to look at. I think right
for
now,
sure.
yeah.
For sure, I agree. I think there should be more, especially for like, high sticks that are missed or things like that are easier to call, or elbows or
Just
things
get
like
that second set of eyes to confirm.
Yeah, I think for sure, like the obvious ones that are missed. I'm thinking of in the playoffs, Corey Perry when he was hit with the stick, and he's basically broke his nose and there was no call. So that would be the kind of thing that I would hope could be looked at and checked for sure. But for certain infractions, I think yes, more replay is needed. Well, I'm going to go a little bit away from that because I figured you would all bring that up. But I think, I think one thing is to get rid of the over the glass penalty. I don't like that penalty. I think it's dumb. Meanwhile, you can elbow somebody in the face and get away with it. But if you put the puck over the glass, you get 2 minutes. To me, it's a pointless rule. And anyway, but the other thing I would do is create a partnership with the National Women's Hockey League. I think that is long overdue, and most other professional leagues have something in place, especially the NBA basketball with the WNBA. I just think it's way overdue. And every time, Gary Bettman is asked about it in his, end of season media availability, he kind of gives his usual typical PR answer about it. And it's like, well, are you going to do something about it eventually? Or are you just going to keep sort of floating around the subject and just be like, oh yeah, we'll do something, and then never do it? So that would be what I would do.
NWA is great. I went to a Boston Pride game last, when they still had fans there, and it's so fun to watch. Like
the Whitecaps too.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is it's a very good product. It's been in the Olympic, like it's been an Olympic sport. Like it's not like it's like this unknown entity. Like to me, it's too easy for them not to provide more support. But anyway.
Well, and certain teams have, like Boston, I think, has, the Wild have, like they've partnered with their actual teams here. Like why isn't the NHL making a bigger deal of that, like you said?
Yeah. Agreed. Well, we'll end the show on a sort of happy note, fun note, sweet note. Your most heartwarming moment from this year. Kristy, sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. I'm actually going to go with just the fact that the families got to be there when Tampa won the cup. I listened to one of the hockey podcasts, and Pat Murren's wife was interviewed, and she was kind of going through what they were dealing with the bubble and just the back and forth of like, oh, we're going to get you guys a private jet. Oh, no, you guys aren't going. And I thought it was just nice that they were able to win and actually celebrate with like their wives, the families, the kids. I thought that was just like, that made me happy that they went back to back, because they didn't even get a day with the cup last. Like that kind of was mind blowing that they didn't even. It's like they won, and then it was like, okay, like see you later, like have a good off season,
Yeah, agreed. That's a good one. Hannah?
Oh gosh. I mean, personally, as a Bruins fan, I think Zdeno Chara's first game back in the Garden with fans was really something special. He did so much, not just for the team on the ice. Like he was such a big member of the community. Everyone always would talk about seeing him biking around Boston, and on Thanksgiving he always did this pie delivery to local charities. Like he was really a Bruin that was involved in the Boston community. So being able to have him come back and be acknowledged by the fans, who he's still such a big part of, the Bruins history. So that was a really good, heartwarming moment for me.
Very good. Mariah?
I have two. My first one would be the fans being able to come back into the buildings, like staggered throughout wherever they were. I don't know did Washington finally have some in the building? I know they were, okay. So I know that was one of the talking points at one point. But then the other one would be, last night, Carrie Price and Shea Weber's post-game interview, like you guys had said before, it was really nice to see them act like, I know a lot of times they'll defend their goalie and stuff, but to actually see like Shea Weber right away saying, no, to be honest, it was us, not you. Like him just kind of being a little not irritated, but like, no, don't think that way. Like that was really nice to see that, how much of a team Montreal really is.
Yeah, that's a good one. That actually wasn't mine, so I'm glad you brought that up. Mine is also the fans. Having the fans back at the Bell Center, even if it was only 3,500, even though I think it was a bit more than that, but we won't tell anybody. I was unbelievable, and to see the support and just feel that magic again was unbelievable. And I can't wait for there to be full buildings next year again, because it really isn't the same without them, and it adds so much. And even last night in Tampa, having their fans there was really, it just adds so much to the moment. So yeah.
Well, the funny thing with Montreal, with the 3,500 inside, I think they had that much more outside.
They had there was a lot of people outside, and even in the rain and everything, like crazy. And it was a nice, just everybody was talking about it, like everywhere I went. That's I went somewhere and I saw a Habs jersey, like it was, or someone was talking about it to someone else. And so it was great to have that buzz back in the city. It's been far too long. So that would be it for me, and already counting down till next season starts again.
Yep.
Not so long though. It's it's not in October, so we're almost there. And until then, we have the off season to hold us over. So the next 3 weeks are going to be a bit crazy. And we will be talking about the off season in our upcoming episodes. So make sure you tune in for that. But for this week, that's all the time we have, unfortunately. Thanks to Kristy, Hannah, and Mariah, as always, my partners in crime, for being here. We made it to 10. Let's get to 20. And a special thanks to all of you for watching and listening. We really appreciate your support. Be sure to check out all of the great shows being produced by the Hockey Writers on YouTube, Facebook, and your favorite podcast platform. All of our shows are on iHeartRadio. Don't forget to visit thehockeywriters.com to read all of the content being published daily by our amazing writers. Follow us on social media so you're not missing anything. And last but not least, as Kristy shamelessly plugged earlier in the show, be sure to sign up for the Morning Skate newsletter by visiting morningskate.io, and you'll get all your latest hockey news delivered right to your inbox. So until next week, take care, everyone, and enjoy the off season.